Hey everybody, how you doing? You awake? You with me? I want to start by telling you that I love the end of the world. Check that, I love shows about the end of the world. Probably won't like the actual end of the world all that much. I love, like, post-apocalyptic, you know what I'm talking about? Like anything that is like the, have you guys seen, anybody seen Bird Box? Bird Box is, yeah. Bird Box is on Netflix right now, and my wife and I watched it this week, and it was awesome. Loved every minute of it, but we actually love. Hey Joshua, everybody say hi to Josh. Hi, Josh. Yeah, buddy. Thanks for coming. We love that kid. He's the best. Where was I? Bird Box. Okay, so we love anything. I think Netflix probably has an algorithm that has post-apocalyptic right next to my name. You know, like I love all those shows. Mandy and I watch them, and one of the things I love about watching them is that we always have the same conversation afterwards. We always have the same argument. Which one of us would survive in that apocalypse, right? Like, okay, and here's the thing. I feel like I do pretty well, except we went to go see The Quiet Place. Did you guys go see The Quiet Place? Yeah, and I was pretty, that's the one where if you talk, you die. Yeah, I'm not going to do so well on that one. Pretty sure I'm going to die on that one. But all the rest of them I feel pretty good about. And it's fun. Actually, I love it because it is like fun to think about like what it would be like at the end of the world. And the reason I bring it up today is because our story today happens at the end of the world. Well, not the end of the actual world, but the end of the world for the people who are living it. And what it really looks like today is it's a story that happens in the middle of a famine. And the word famine doesn't sound too scary unless you actually think about what a famine is. There's no food. If I go more than like 4 hours, I woke up at 2 a.m. this morning and my stomach was gurgling. You know what I'm talking about? Like I hadn't eaten since like 4 p.m. and it was the end of the world. A famine, there's no food. And I know it's hard for us to even wrap our minds around what life would be like in a place where there is no food. And so I thought, I was thinking about it this week, how do we get ourselves in the place where we understand the desperation of what it looks like to live in a famine? And I actually ran across the writing of a young man named John, who was an artist back in the 1840s and 1850s. And he was in Ireland during the potato famine in Ireland. And so he was there, and he decided he was going to go tour some of the ravaged areas, and he was going to write about it. And he wrote some things about it. And I got to be honest with you, it's not a fun thing to listen to. You know what I'm saying? This is not going to be super yay-rah happy. But I think it's important for us to at least try to step into the world of people who are going through something like a famine. Just listen to some of what this guy wrote. He says, I started from Cork, which is a town, and saw little until we came to Clonakilty. That sounds Irish. Where the coach stopped for breakfast. And here, for the first time, the horrors of the poverty became visible. In the vast number of famished poor who flocked around the coach to beg alms. Amongst them was a woman, and in her arms, the corpse of a fine child. And making the most distressing appeal to the passengers for aid to enable her to purchase a coffin to bury her dear little baby. He goes on, we next reached Skibbereen, and there I saw the dying, the living, and the dead, all lying indiscriminately upon the same floor, without anything between them and the cold earth, save a few miserable rags upon them. To point to any particular house as proof of this would be a waste of time, as all were in the same state, and not a single house out of 500 could boast of being free from death and fever, though several could be pointed out with the dead lying close to the living for the space of 3 or 4, even 6 days without any effort being made to remove the bodies. All sympathy between the living and the dead seems completely out of the question. So hardened are the men regularly employed in the removal of the dead that I saw one of them with 4 coffins in a car, driving to the churchyard, sitting upon one of the coffins, and smoking with much apparent enjoyment. I think it's hard for us to wrap our minds around how life changes when there's no food. You're not just hungry. Hunger turns to desperation, and that desperation is also marked by death. That there is death all around. You know, for us, death is such a rare thing. But when you're living in a place that's post-apocalyptic, when you're living at the end of the world, death becomes commonplace. I know it's morbid. I'm sorry for starting out so morbid today, but I want to take you to that place because that is the world that was happening during the time that we're going to study today. And our main character is Elijah. And Elijah not only was there in the midst of the famine, Elijah predicted it. So here's the story. Elijah is sent by God to an evil king Ahab to say, you have done evil in the eyes of the Lord. Now there is going to be a drought, and there will be not a lick of rain until I tell you otherwise. And then God says to Elijah, now you better run. Get out of here before they kill you. And so he sends Elijah to this little hidden away place called the Kerith Ravine. And that's where we find Elijah. Let's read a little. It says, Elijah went to the Kerith Ravine, east of the Jordan, and stayed there. And the ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. The end of the world was good to Elijah. I actually don't mind the idea of this, like, I'm going to go backpacking in a little bit. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to be out in Death Valley. I can't wait for that. But I got to tell you, the idea of being all alone and somebody's just bringing me food all the time, heck yeah. I like bread. I like meat. Good to go. I don't know. It seems like Elijah might have been kind of protected from this. And do you wonder if he was oblivious? Because outside of this little ravine, the world was coming to an end. People were dying. It was a famine. And, probably in the first couple of weeks, not a big deal. After a month of no rain, 2 months of no rain, people probably started freaking out. As months dragged on into years, it became unlivable. And the same descriptions of the Irish potato famine must have dotted the countryside of Israel. The living and the dead lying on the same floor. This is the kind of life that was happening, but I wonder if Elijah was oblivious, right? He's living in his little garden paradise in the Kerith Ravine. Let's keep reading. Sometime later, the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. And then the word of the Lord came to him. Go at once to Zarephath in the region of Sidon and stay there. I have directed a widow there to supply you with food. How cool is that? I don't have to deal with the ravens anymore. There's some rich lady in Sidon who is going to take care of me. This is awesome. I gotta go. So he packs up. It's like 50 miles probably. He packs up his stuff. He probably didn't have stuff. No, he probably just left. And he heads towards Sidon. Let's keep reading. So he went to Zarephath. And when he came to the town gate, a widow was there gathering sticks. And he called to her and asked, would you bring me a little water in a jar so I may have a drink? And as she was going to get it, he called after her, get this, he called after her, and bring me please a piece of bread. Listen to her response. As surely as the Lord your God lives, she replied, I don't have any bread. Only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. And I'm gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. Wait, what? God, I don't think you quite, like, you said the words, I have directed a widow. That's like past tense. That means you have at least talked to her. You've at least, let her know that I'm coming. The whole point was there was a rich lady who was going to take care of me. Who is this widow? That's what I would have said. That's not Elijah. Elijah's a way better person than me. We will learn that. That's not hard to learn, actually. But here's how it goes. Elijah knows exactly what to say. She says, I don't have anything. This is the last thing I've got, and we're going to eat it and die. And then Elijah said to her, don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first, everybody say, but first. But first, make a small loaf of bread for me. What? But first make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me. And then make something for yourself and your son. And then he says, why? For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land. And she did it. She went away and did as Elijah had told her. So there was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and her family. For the jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word of the Lord spoken by Elijah. It's an incredible story in the end. And we're gonna kind of live in that story a little bit, and we're gonna look at it from three perspectives. We're gonna look at it from the perspective of Elijah, the widow, and her son. And we're gonna learn some lessons from it. But before we do, I want to remind you of the series that we're in right now. We just started last week this series we're calling Why. And why is just a way for us to ask, why on earth do you wake up every Sunday morning and get the kids ready and pull yourself together to come to this place? Why on earth would we give our time and our energy and our money to keep this place, this church, going, imperfect as it is? Why on earth do we do this? Is it even worth it? What are the reasons behind what we do? Why is it that Kellen's our associate pastor, why is it that we give our lives to lead this place, to do something good? What matters? And we really break it down into four things. Four things that make our church distinct. Four things that make us feel like this is who we are. Number one, Kellen talked about it last week. Lost people matter most. In this place, lost people matter. He did a fantastic job talking about it last week. That here in our church, if you are a Christian, we love you. We want to equip you, but you are a second-class citizen. We are not here for you. We exist for people who are not here yet. Lost people matter most. I can make a pretty strong biblical argument for that, just so you know. That's the first thing. That is who we are. The second thing is what I'm going to talk to you about today. Our heart is drawn to the needy. And this isn't something that we just kind of hope and wish is true. This is something that is born in our church. Our heart is drawn to the needy. We're going to talk more about that today. Number three, next week, I'm going to preach again. And I'm going to get a chance to talk about how everybody in our church gets grace. Everybody outside our church gets grace. And everybody, no matter who you are, belongs here. And then Kellen's going to wrap the whole thing up with our mission statement. We exist to know Jesus and to make him known. And on that week, we're going to have our baptistry here in the service. And we're gonna offer baptism to anybody who is ready, anybody who's thought about it. If that's something that you have thought about in the past, maybe you don't know what you think, maybe your kid feels like they're at the right age and we can have a conversation about that, that would be wonderful. But if God speaks, I want you to pray about it. I want you to ask God, if you've never been baptized, I want you to ask God, is this something you want from me? To share fully in your death, burial, and resurrection. A symbol of putting to death your old self and bringing yourself up, being brought back into new life. And so if you're interested in that, stop by Next Steps on your way out, drop off a card, and put baptism on it, and we would love to talk to you about that. So those are the 4 weeks. But today I want to talk about the fact that in our church, our hearts are drawn to the needy. But it's much more complicated than that. The reality is, though, the fact that our hearts are drawn to the needy is just, we believe, a reflection of the ministry of Jesus. You look at Jesus' ministry, he was always drawn to the needy. And that, Jesus' ministry, is just a reflection of the heart of God. God's heart is drawn to the needy, to the desperate. And so we're going to start from Elijah's perspective. We're going to learn a lesson from Elijah today. And so I want to take you back. I want to take you back to the moment. I want to take you back to the moment that he meets this woman. And he walks up and he asks her for water. And as she's walking away, he calls after her and says, "Anne, can I have some bread?" And then she speaks this amazing, awful sentence. "I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. And I'm gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son that we may eat it and die." Tell me that's not a heartbreaking piece of scripture. And into this moment, Elijah knows exactly what, somehow, I don't know how, but he knows exactly what he's supposed to say to her, but my guess is he doesn't want to say it. Because what he has to say is, in this moment, at the lowest point in your life, I want you, instead of taking yourself home and making yourself your last thing, you first give me some bread. Do you feel the awkwardness there? Do you feel how, I can't even imagine how difficult it was for Elijah to speak that out, how difficult it is for him to ask this woman to give the last of what she has, or at least part of it. And then he gives her, but God's going to bless you. If you do it, you're going to get a miracle. And I got to be honest with you, if I'm the lady in this moment, I think I probably am a little, skeptical. Because my dad always used to say, if it seems too good to be true, probably is, right? I don't know if I'd have done it. But here's the truth, I'm not desperate. When you're at the end of yourself there is a glimmer of hope. This woman reached out and grabbed it, but I want you to hold on to that moment. That moment that Elijah knew exactly the right way to serve this woman. It wasn't to go find her some food so that she and her son would live. It was to ask her to give of what little she had. And it brings me to the lesson from Elijah today, that serving desperate people is messy. Serving desperate people is messy. Our heart is drawn as a church to serving the needy, but it is messy. A few years ago, while I was down in Beloit still, there was a woman who came to our church, and we really felt like God was calling us to help her. She was a single mom. She had a few kids. She had an apartment, but had no furniture. And so we kind of pulled together some money, we pulled together some people, and we took over some furniture just for her and her kids. And it turns out that within 2 weeks, she apparently was an addict, and she traded the toddler bed for a fix. Because serving desperate people is messy. And the question is, was it not worth it? No. It was worth it. Serving desperate people is always messy. We were down at the Fourth Ward Park this last summer for VBS. And there was a woman that came across the street, and she was it was clear she was drunk. And there were a million kids around, so I kind of went over and just kind of tried to hang out with her for a little bit. And she said, "Oh, I need you to come over to my house because I got all this furniture that I want to give to somebody who's in need." I was like, Okay, but I wasn't going over to her house by myself. So, so I went and grabbed my friend Jeff, and I said, let's go. So we went over to this lady's house, and she's like walking around, this one, we can take pictures, and so I'm taking, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm taking pictures of this furniture, and I just don't exactly know, and my heart, I think to myself, God, I'm supposed to serve this woman somehow, but I don't know how. And it was messy, and it was weird, and we left, and I told her I'd call her in the next day or two, and I did, and when I did, she didn't remember hardly any of it, and she sure as heck wasn't giving away her furniture. You see, serving desperate people is always messy, but when our hearts are in the right place, it is also incredibly rewarding. Always messy, but it is incredibly rewarding. You see, if we are waiting for something clear-cut and easy and safe before we're willing to step in and help somebody who's desperate, we're going to be waiting a long time. Because serving desperate people is messy. What we have to be willing to do, and this is the lesson. What we have to be willing to do is let go of the end result and give because God has called us. Let go of the end result and serve because God has called us to serve. That God gets to be in charge of that. I've got an ongoing argument with my brother-in-law. He lives in Denver. There's a lot of homeless people in Denver. In his glove compartment, he keeps these little kind of slim New Testaments with a $20 bill in them. He keeps a bunch in there. And anytime somebody who's homeless asks him for money, he gives them the $20 bill with the Bible. And I say, oh my God, what are you doing, Brian? You know where that money is going. I still don't know if I agree with him, but I will say this. There's some amazing heart in this. And here's what he says. He says, God doesn't call me to choose where that goes. God calls me to serve. And so, what they do with it is between them and God. What's between God and me is that I am called to serve the poor. There's something there. Goes against my American, I need to control that thing. But what we have to be willing to do, if we're going to serve desperate people in messy situations, we have got to let go of the end result and just serve the person who's in front of us. That's the lesson from Elijah. Now let's take a look at this from the widow's perspective. Can we get back into that desperate mindset? Can we get back to where your life has been utterly destroyed? A widow at this time is already a person who is vulnerable at all times. And now, there's no food, there's no water, you got a kid. How are you gonna support? What would you do? What would you be willing to do? Would you be willing to do anything? I think I'd be willing to do anything. What wouldn't I do to give food to my kid? It's a short list. So here you have this woman. She's living at the worst. Think about the worst moment of your life. Whatever it is. The darkest hour, the lowest place you have ever been. This woman left her home to gather sticks to make a last meal for herself and her son so they could eat it and die. It's about as low as it gets. And into this moment steps a man who asks her to serve him. She has nothing. And he asks her to serve him. And I think in the moment, in her service, she gives us a lesson. And the lesson is this: serving out of our lack is fertile ground for God's hope and peace. Serving out of our lack. I know that's kind of a weird sentence. Wasn't quite sure how to say it, but the serving when we don't have what we think we have. Maybe you don't have a lot of money, and maybe you're not sure how you're going to pay all your bills, and you come across somebody who has it way worse than you do, right? And you feel like somebody should help this person. But I don't have a lot of money. Somebody rich should help this person, right? But if we wait for the rich person to help this person that God has put in front of us, that person will be taken care of, but we will have missed the hope and the peace, because it is in the moment that we serve out of our lack that we get a chance for God to show his hope, to show his peace for us. I've got a friend who, a few years ago, she had $50 cash. She was doing the cash envelope thing, you know. She had $50 cash for groceries, family of 5. And she ran across somebody and felt like she knew that this person needed that $50 more than I do. She gave it away. And now I know for some of us, $50, not a big deal. I could go to the, we go to the ATM, pick up $50, and never notice it, right? That's not the case for her. But she knew, out of her lack, if God told her to give, she was going to give. And I'm not going to say that life has been easy for her or her family, but I will say they're now a family of 6 and they own their own home, and life has moved on for her, and God did take care of her. Nobody starved, right? But she learned the lesson that serving out of our lack is fertile ground for God's hope and his peace. Listen, it might not be money. It might not be a lack of... There's some of us in this room that writing a check is easy. You know what I'm saying? Something needs done, something needs to happen. Hey, I'll just write a check. And please, keep writing checks. We want you to keep writing checks. But if serving out of your overflow is so easy, I'm telling you, you might be missing the blessing that comes with serving out of your lack. And if money isn't the lack, maybe it's time. Maybe you lack a lot of time. That you are a busy person. And I gotta say, if that's the case, the way you serve out of your lack is you make time for people who are needy. You make time for people who are desperate. Maybe it's your energy. Maybe you just don't have the energy to serve. And maybe what you need to do is serving out of your lack of energy is to get rid of something so that you can bring on the ability to serve somebody who's desperate. Serving out of our lack is fertile ground for God's hope and peace. That's the second lesson. Now let's talk about the son. Son kind of feels like a secondary character in this whole thing. But I wonder what his life was like. I mean, he lost his dad. There's a drought, which causes a famine. He doesn't really understand all those big things, except he does understand that his mom is lonely. And that she works her butt off. And that she comes home with tears in her eyes. And every time she opens that jar of flour and it gets a little bit lower, she gets a little bit more worried. So here's a boy who's living in a world that feels out of control. He has nothing to say about it. Every kid feels that way, right? Every kid feels like everything's out of control. But I'm telling you, this kid feels like there is nothing that's under his control. And I wonder if you ever feel like that. I wonder if you ever feel like there are forces at work around you that you have no control over. That you feel like as an American, I'm supposed to pull myself up by my own bootstraps. And it feels possible if I'm born to the right people, if I have the right kind of money, if I've got the right color skin, if I think all the right things, if I know all the right people, that feels doable. But in my life, it doesn't feel doable. Have you ever felt out of control? That there are forces at work around you that make your life so difficult and that you don't have any say in the matter. And then it gets worse. Sometimes you think you're at your low, and then it goes down even further, like somebody dug a hole underneath the hole. And you think it can't get worse, and you think it's going to be over, but somehow, some way, you look back, and God brought you through it. Even when you make it through to the other side, all you're doing is thinking, when's that other shoe going to drop? When's it going to happen again? When's it going to get bad again? This was where the son was. I believe every morning this boy woke up hoping that the miracle happened again. He doesn't understand it. Why would he trust it? Every morning he woke up hoping that the miracle would happen again. He had no control over it and never knew when the whole thing was going to end or when everything was going to get worse. And it did. Sometime later, the son of the woman who owned the house became ill. He grew worse and worse and finally stopped breathing. You ever get the sense that the desperate keep getting the shaft? The people who got the shaft before keep getting the shaft. And so the widow, in her despair and anger, she turns it on Elijah and she lets him have it. And then Elijah turns toward God and he's mad too. And this is what he says. Elijah took the boy from her arms, carried him to the upper room where he was staying, and laid him on his bed. And then he cried out to the Lord, Lord, my God, have you brought tragedy even on this widow I'm staying with by causing her son to die? This is your fault, God. Then he stretched himself out on the boy 3 times and cried out to the Lord, Lord, my God, let this boy's life return to him. And the Lord heard Elijah's cry, and the boy's life returned to him, and he lived. Elijah picked up the child and carried him down from the room into the house. He gave him to his mother and said, look, your son is alive. Can you imagine the roller coaster this boy has been on? He lost his father. There was a drought. There was a famine. He watched his mother wither away to almost nothing, fretting. And then there's a miracle. And the miracle happened every day, and they go back up the roller coaster, and things are going well. And then all of a sudden he starts to get sick, and it's not good at first, but then it gets worse and worse. And at some point his mother realized this is it. He's not going to make it. And can you imagine the panic and the fear in this little boy all the way up until he finally dies? Can you imagine what it's like to die and then not be dead? What is that? I don't even know what that is. He died and then he's not dead, right? That's the story. This boy has been on a roller coaster that no adult should go through. And he has no control in any of it. It's all happening to him. I think a lot of us have been there, feeling like we are always on the verge of another tragedy, waiting for the other shoe to drop in a world that is spinning out of control. But I believe there is a lesson from the Son as well. And here's the lesson. Every story of pain is a picture of the resurrection. Every single time you thought, this is the end, and it wasn't. Every time you were about to give up, but you pushed through and came out on the other side. Every time you thought, this right here, this is the thing that's going to ruin me, and it doesn't. Every one of those is a picture of the resurrection of Jesus. This boy actually was raised from the dead. And it was foreshadowing, obviously, Jesus, who would be raised from the dead on Easter. But I wonder if you feel out of control in your life. If you feel like your life could possibly be a picture of the resurrection. And the reason I can say it is because over and over, I want to remind you, over and over throughout your life, this is an important practice for us to get involved in, is to remind ourselves where God has taken us through in the past. Because our lives, every ugly story from our lives, are a picture of the resurrection of Jesus. I hate feeling out of control. I hate it. I hate when there are forces arrayed. I hate when there are doctor's visits that I don't know how they're going to go. I hate all of that stuff. I hate it. But here's what I've learned. I've learned that feeling out of control is the perfect place to experience the resurrection power of God. I think the same is true when we talk about our heart for the needy. When we are at our lowest point, when we are at our most desperate, that's when we are ready and able and willing to experience the resurrection power of Jesus. The same is true when we serve someone who is desperate. Most often they are at their most ready to experience the resurrection power. I think that's part of why Jesus asks us to serve the needy. But here's what we know. Elijah taught us that serving the desperate is messy. And the widow taught us that we need to learn to serve out of our own lack. And the boy reminds us that it is at our weakest, at our most vulnerable, at the most vulnerable of the people that we serve, where the resurrection power of Jesus is most at work. That's why we serve the desperate. That's why our hearts are drawn to those in need. Not because we want to convert them to our religion. Can I say that, please? Not because we want to convert them to a religion, but because we want to offer them the chance to experience resurrection power at their most desperate. Would you pray with me?